So I think that many people are freaking out based on what happened this week with the Netanyahu election over in Israel. Yes, I'll call it that. It was the Netanyahu election because the entire theme of it was how everybody who had an opinion around the world, the only thing they cared about was that Benjamin Netanyahu failed and that he would lose. And I have been pretty on the fence since starting this channel. I don't really go and make unqualified endorsements for politicians that I don't necessarily agree with, and I'm not going to do it for Netanyahu. I think Netanyahu he's literally had 10 years to address a lot of the problems that he campaigned on when he came back to power in 2009, and he hasn't. So, with that in context, let me just say that the fact is he did win this week. He won very resoundingly. Everybody knows it. There are tons and tons of articles that are going out where they say that the main takeaway from this election is that Bibi won and everyone else lost. And the reason that that happened, in my opinion, is entirely due to the media obsession with Netanyahu. And you might find that familiar because it's the same thing that the media did with Donald Trump, who was running not even as an incumbent in 2016. It's also the same thing they did with Bolsonaro. It's the same thing they did with Brexit and Nigel Farage. It's the same thing they've done with Viktor Orban. It's the same thing they do with Vladimir Putin, even though in Russia, there's more people who dispute the elections in Russia than obviously in some of the other countries I mentioned. But still, people obsess over Vladimir Putin, and they've done the same thing with Duterte. I could go on and on and on and talk about these countries because the reason I'm talking about this is that when I was growing up in a home where, especially, my mom was pretty much a political and religious agnostic, and I grew up in her house. Over the weekends, I'd go to my dad's house, and he was a little more of a interested person in politics. He was very much a liberal in American politics, but he was a staunch Zionist and much more of a politically involved Zionist. And I personally have always been a political agnostic and really kind of somebody who doesn't necessarily go and enlist in any cause or group or anything. I've always been real. It's been very difficult for people to get me to go along with a group program. People that know me from back in high school would probably know that I was pretty much a wet blanket, if you can call it that. But going back to the topic of today, I'm going to call this the sinking ship of liberal and progressive Zionism. And it's something that should have been obvious for many, many years. It's that many people, they may hold progressive and liberal opinions, but those people are not the ones who are going to be conveying the Zionist movement, whatever the hell that is, for the next, decades or so. It's going to be many years before any sort of liberal Zionist movement gets reinvigorated, because slowly you see that a lot of these people don't really accept the mandate of democracy, whether it's in the U.S., whether it's in Israel, whether it's in Russia, whether it's in Gaza, whether it's in Britain, doesn't matter where. They are people who they have a certain set of core beliefs, and that takes precedence over the will of the voters. And unfortunately, I think this type of mentality is unraveling the philosophy of liberalism. Back in the day, I think liberalism, and you guys could argue with me all you want, but most people would have considered themselves liberals if they believed that you could listen to whatever music you want. If you believed that, for example, in racial integration, if you believed that there should be no limit to interracial marriages, if you believe that people's private lives should be their own, things like that. And many of those positions are mine. I don't think that I would be somebody who would be defined as illiberal. I certainly have many libertarian opinions. So liberalism has certainly taken a huge blow in the past several years, especially since I believe the election of Barack Obama, because instead of preaching for people to mind their own business and sort of live and let live, they're trying to tell other people how to live their lives, what type of clothes to wear, what type of video games to play, who to eat lunch with, what places to eat lunch with at. Okay, so here it is. This is the Times of Israel, and they're reporting according. And this is. I'm not saying that this is a credible source, but there is. This is what happens after every election over there because it's proportional representation, and every government has to be formed with a coalition. There's now talk that Netanyahu will form a government with the blue and white coalition, which is his main opponent, and the third party would be the Israel Beitenu party, which is Avigdor Lieberman's party. And the fact is that this could really happen. So if you think that this, what did I say earlier this week? I said very clearly that people who were expecting any different result besides Netanyahu getting elected were playing themselves. The fact is that there's more right-wing voters in Israel. There's more right-wing parties. And the other parties that are not right-wing are very disunited. It's just a matter of fact. And people who want this to be some sort of dramatic plot line are seriously in need of a hobby or something else to do with their lives. So, yeah, this could happen. Now, there is a higher likelihood that Netanyahu will just tell the blue and white coalition to go screw themselves. But if this happens, it could be that he wins another victory, which many people are, people who know the way politics works in countries like Israel should recognize that this could lead to a split in the blue and white coalition because one of the leaders of it, Yair Lapid and Benny Gantz, could decide, well, this isn't really what I ran for. I'm going to split off and not enter the government. This would be an even bigger victory for Netanyahu. And the fact of the matter is that the obsession with him and the idea that he is the end-all, be-all of the opposition to, the status quo in Israel has helped his career. He's become basically the enemy of the media there. I was watching the election coverage, the live election coverage for a few hours on Tuesday, and it was hilarious. It was even more biased to the left than reporting here. And again, I would say that if I lived over there, I don't know who I'd vote for, but I don't think I would vote for Netanyahu. I don't think that he'd be a good leader. I don't really have that's one of the reasons that I think that the politics there is so screwed up. You have a lot of choices, and a lot of them don't really offer anything unique. So to accentuate that, why do I consider myself different from this? Sometimes, to be a mature person in life, you have to accept what you don't like. You have to accept adversity and things that you don't really agree with. So I'll show you very briefly a clip of me talking about the election of the Marxist president of Mexico last year. Probably a guy named AMLO getting through. His name's Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador. He's a veteran politician in Mexico, far left politician. I think that one of the reasons that he's going to be elected is that he's been shafted a few times, and he actually deserved to win a couple times. If you really believe in democracy, I believe it was in 2006, he was the candidate that was screwed out of the presidency. In 2012, I think it was a little less close, but also people were. So anyway, yeah, I said that he should have been elected that other time. If it would have come earlier, it wouldn't be such a resounding victory for him in this election, which just happened. So, yeah, I really stand by that. I think that, unfortunately, we have to accept even leftist leaders that win elections. If they win elections cleanly, I don't know what you're supposed to say, that the people made the wrong choice, that you shouldn't trust the voice of the people. But that's what liberal people say. So you have people like here, Bari Weiss. This was on February 24th. She said, Netanyahu has committed the secular equivalent of Chilul Hashem. He has desecrated the name of Israel. Chilul Hashem means actually desecrating the name of God or the Jewish people. That's a religious conflict. But what he was referring to was his willingness to negotiate and include in his coalition a group called Otzma Yehudit, which means Jewish power, which is a descendant of the hardcore nationalist group called Kach, which was actually banned in 1984 for racist beliefs in the Israeli Knesset. So this group is kind of an offshoot. What happens in some countries is that if one group is banned, their members migrate to a new party and reconstitute themselves because they say, well, you banned the organization, but you can't ban us. And legally, they're absolutely correct. So what Bari Weiss is effectively saying is that even considering the possibility that these people could be elected legally, they shouldn't have the right to be a part of a government. Well, what she's basically saying is that the people's vote doesn't really count, and therefore democracy is nothing but a formality. And this is why Bari Weiss is, I guess, considered a middle of the road centrist neoliberal. I'd say she was probably kind of a Romneyite Republican or something, or maybe an Obama Democrat. It doesn't really matter. It's the same thing. But she is a staunch supporter of Israel for many, many years. And this is her basically belly aching about the fact that some people happen to vote for parties that she doesn't agree with, which is fine. But she's writing for the New York Times. She has a blue check mark. She has, and she's endorsing these political opinions of people from another country about their government. That's fine. That's again, as somebody, I support the cause of somebody who has just been arrested across the sea, whose name I can't mention. By the way, there's a BitChute video out. Go to my BitChute channel, at Chef Leopard on BitChute, and you can see it concerning a matter that cannot be discussed on YouTube. So essentially what she's saying is, well, we shouldn't really trust the people's voice. And it's the same idea over here. You have Bret Stevens saying, time for Netanyahu to go. Israel's prime minister increasingly resembles America's 37th president, referring to Richard Nixon. And he's saying, when the final chapter on Benjamin Netanyahu's political life is written, and it may be a long time from now, he's likely to go down as the Richard Nixon of Israel, politically cunning, strategically canny, toxically flawed. The flaws came further to light on Thursday when Attorney General Avichai Mandelblit announced that he would indict the prime minister on charges of bribery, fraud, and breach of trust. Netanyahu called the inquiry a witch hunt and accused Mandelblit of being weak, resounding surely not by coincidence, just like Donald Trump on the subject of Jeff Sessions and the Russian investigation. So look, I am somebody who I don't necessarily take a stance where I think people are beyond reproach. I think certainly Netanyahu is a corrupt leader. Unfortunately, a lot of the other leaders in Israel are corrupt. The person that I most looked up to as a leader over there as a kid was Ehud Barak. And he's very corrupt. He basically has become more of a political consultant, even though every now and then he tries to run for office and stuff like that. He does more, consulting and charging fees than he does through actually doing his job. Just as the real crime of Watergate was the bungled cover-up, the real scandal of BBGate has been the repugnant political patch-up. Until last month, Netanyahu looked as if he would coast to re-election, but the race became much tighter with the creation of the center-right blue and white party, led by the former Army Chief of Staff Benny Gantz and the former Finance Minister Yair Lapid. The pending indictment only increases Netanyahu's political peril. Netanyahu's solution has been to scrounge for votes on the farther and farthest right. A few of those votes will come from the Otzma Yehudit, a racist party descended from Rabbi Meir Kahana's outlawed Kach party. Its leader, Michael Ben-Ari, was denied a United States visa because Washington rightly considers Kach a terrorist organization. So, look, he quit the party. Kach was banned prior to any of its members actually committing a terrorist act. There was a terrorist act in, I think it was 1993, at the Cave of the Patriarchs, committed by Baruch Goldstein. But the truth is that it, first of all, he was never found culpable for it, and those people who are complaining now about the fact that certain people are not allowed into the country. For example, the leader of the BDS movement has been denied entry into the U.S., which I would say is, I don't know that that's a good thing. I would probably say it's not good. I would say if I'm going to be consistent, I would let him into the U.S. But the fact is that the U.S. is allowed to deny entry to the leader of the BDS movement, and they can also deny entry to Michael Ben-Ari. But he's been elected to the Knesset before, and I think that if people want to vote for a person into their parliament, they should be allowed to, as long as these people are not advocating directly for violence and inciting and doing things that are inciting to violence. I don't think that you should deny them their constitutional rights. That being said, he's a foreign national and can be denied entry to the country. If Netanyahu manages to cobble together a ruling coalition, Ben-Ari could become a power broker within it. That alone is reason enough to want to see Netanyahu given the boot. Add to this list his demagogic attacks on Israeli Arabs, his closeness to far-right European leaders such as Hungary's Viktor Orban, and his public sympathy for an Israeli soldier who killed a wounded Palestinian terrorist in cold blood, and a consistent picture emerges. So the last issue I'm not so much familiar with, but the fact is that the only issue that I think really voters should have cared about was the corruption. But he's muddied the waters by bringing out things that are really in the realm of opinion. Okay, and Bret Stevens, with all due respect, he doesn't get to tell people who to vote for, especially not in a foreign country. Now, another thing that Netanyahu actually went forward and said as a campaign promise in the days leading up to the election was that he would annex parts of the West Bank. He wasn't going to annex the entire West Bank, but he would annex blocks of settlements within the West Bank, which would be, in the eyes of many people around the world, and this is not, putting an opinion there, it is for sure, it's a violation of a number of understandings under the Oslo Accords. It would be effectively saying that Israel no longer believes in the Oslo process. And as such, certain congressmen who are pro-Israel have put out statements that they are, worried about the two-state solution. It says Representative Elliot Engel, chair of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, Representative Nita Lowey, Ted Deutsch, and Brad Schneider today made the following statement: a strong lifelong supporters of Israel, a U.S.-Israel relationship rooted in our shared values and the two-state solution. We are greatly concerned by the possibility of Israel taking unilateral steps to annex the West Bank. So, again, he's not calling on annexing the whole West Bank. And if you want to make this is a legitimate complaint. People who are against Netanyahu can legitimately say that he would be violating the process by unilaterally annexing parts of the West Bank. Okay? That's fine. He is not going to annex the entire West Bank. This is what I'm saying. I'm not telling you that he's correct. I'm saying that they're talking about the entire West Bank, which is not the case. Every one of Israel's frontiers plays an important role in security, and Israel's ability to guard itself from threats is non-negotiable. We hope that any security measures are implemented within the context of preserving the eventual possibility of a two-state solution. 2 states for 2 people is negotiated directly by the two sides, with mutually agreed upon land swaps is the best option to achieve a Jewish, democratic, secure Israel living side by side with a democratic, demilitarized Palestinian state. So if you're an observer, okay, any side would see that this is a weaselly statement, okay? Because if you're a pro-Palestinian person, you probably would object to the Palestinian state being demilitarized. But in fact, I think that is part of the Oslo Accord process. So you would have to say that now that Netanyahu is annexing parts of the West Bank, they could make a point that, well, now we don't have to abide by demilitarization. But by him annexing parts of the West Bank, that does not negate the possibility of a future land swap where Israel gives part of Israel, notably the the triangle. Okay, this is so these are Israeli towns and villages that are around the what they call Kav HaTefer, which is the seam line of Israel. That's, for example, Taiba, which is over here. You see this map over here. It's very close to the border, probably around there. Okay, so you see this point over here. So these areas over here are largely populated by Arabs, and that could in the future be ceded to a future Palestinian state under the Oslo Accords. Whatever, if you're a person who believes in the Oslo process, would still be possible. So then it continues. This will not be easy. Palestinian leadership has been unwilling to accept any reasonable peace proposal or even to negotiate seriously toward a solution. To paraphrase Abba Eban, who was the former foreign minister of Israel, the Palestinians never miss an opportunity, and instead of negotiating, they have pursued unilateral statehood through the United Nations. Our fear is that such unilateral steps, whether from Israelis or Palestinians, would push the parties farther from a final negotiated statement. So this is literally the end of liberal Zionism. These people who issued this statement are liberal Zionists from the Democratic Party, and those of you that think that this is going to, save their face among their own public, which is, pro-Israel voters, are mistaken. Those people are probably not focused on the nuances of this issue. This is what I'm saying. The nuances of the issue are so beyond the realm of conversation right now because so much is tied up in the Omar issue or Rashida Tlaib or CARE or other issues that are going on that these people are going to start to vote for other people. I don't know if they're going to vote Republican, but they might not vote at all. These politicians are basically clutching to the last strands of their movement, and their movement is falling apart. The future of Zionism as a movement in the U.S. will probably be connected to the Republican Party and the Republican establishment, if I may say so. So, this video isn't intended to be an endorsement of anybody discussed here, whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans or Netanyahu or the Palestinians or the Israelis. This is merely talking about the phenomenon going on and what's unfolding from the perspective of somebody who saw a lot of this coming based on the election coverage in Israel. So again, please like, share, subscribe, and also subscribe to me on BitChute at Chef Leopard, on Gab at Starscream85, as well as on Minds.com, also at Chef Leopard. I'll talk to you later. Have a great weekend.